You lace up your running shoes every morning with purpose. Hit the pavement with dedication and watch the miles add up on your fitness tracker with pride. You're sweating, you're breathing hard, you're pushing through the burn, and you're absolutely convinced that all this effort is melting away the fat. But then you step on the scale, and nothing has changed. Week after week, you keep running, keep logging those miles, keep telling yourself that consistency will pay off, yet your body refuses to cooperate. The frustration builds because you're doing everything the fitness world tells you to do, but the results simply aren't showing up. What if I told you that this isn't your fault, and it's not about lacking discipline or willpower? What if the very thing you're doing to lose fat is actually telling your body to hold on to it even tighter? This isn't some fitness myth or motivational fluff. It's a biological reality that most people never learn about, and understanding it could completely transform the way you approach training and fat loss forever. Running has been celebrated for decades as one of the best exercises for burning calories, improving heart health, and building endurance. There's no denying that when you run, you're expending energy, and that energy expenditure should theoretically create a calorie deficit that leads to fat loss. On paper, it makes perfect sense. More running equals more calories burned, and more calories burned should equal less body fat. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The human body doesn't operate like a simple calculator where calories in minus calories out equals results. Your body is far more sophisticated, far more adaptive, and frankly, far more protective of itself than that simplistic equation suggests. The real controller of whether you lose fat or hold on to it isn't just how many calories you burn during your run. It's the hormonal environment your body creates in response to the stress you're placing on it. And this is where everything you thought you knew about running and fat loss starts to unravel in the most eye-opening way. When you increase your running volume, especially when you're pounding the pavement day after day without adequate recovery, something shifts inside your body. Instead of viewing this constant activity as a healthy challenge, your body starts interpreting it as a threat. Biologically, your system doesn't distinguish between the stress of running 10 miles and the stress of being chased by a predator or facing a famine. All it knows is that you're demanding energy repeatedly, recovery is limited, and resources might be scarce. So what does your body do? It adapts by entering what can only be described as survival mode. In this state, your metabolism doesn't cooperate with your fat loss goals. Instead, it does the exact opposite. It begins to conserve energy and cling to fat stores because, from an evolutionary standpoint, that's the smart move when the body perceives prolonged physical stress. The internal signals being sent throughout your system during those long, repeated runs are essentially whispering to your body that it needs to prepare for scarcity, not burn through reserves. And this happens quietly, without you even realizing that your well-intentioned training is working against your goals. Now, let's talk about the hormone that sits at the center of this entire paradox. Cortisol is one of the most misunderstood players in your body's hormonal lineup. It's not inherently bad. In fact, cortisol is essential for survival. When you start a run, cortisol rises naturally to mobilize energy from your stores, sharpen your focus, and keep you alert and moving. In short bursts, this is incredibly helpful. It's your body's way of saying, "Let's get this done." But here's the problem. When running becomes a daily grind, when your training volume keeps climbing without proper rest, and when your body never gets a chance to fully recover, cortisol stops being your friend. It stops acting like a supportive ally and starts behaving like a chronic stressor. Studies have shown that persistently elevated cortisol levels redirect your body's energy priorities. Instead of supporting long-term processes like fat burning and muscle building, your system shifts toward immediate survival needs. This hormonal shift doesn't just mess with fat storage. It influences your appetite, disrupts your sleep, affects your motivation, and even changes how your body distributes fat, often pushing it toward your midsection where it's hardest to lose. Think about this from an evolutionary perspective for a moment. Our ancestors didn't go for long runs because they enjoyed it. They ran because they were hunting, fleeing danger, or traveling long distances out of necessity. And when they did, it often meant that food was scarce or that survival was on the line. The body adapted to these conditions by becoming incredibly efficient at preserving energy. Fat, being the most energy-dense macronutrient, became the ultimate insurance policy. So when you run for extended periods day after day, your body interprets this as a signal that times might be tough, and it responds by holding on to fat as a protective mechanism. This response is hardwired into your biology. Your body doesn't know you're running to lose weight. All it knows is that you're expending a lot of energy repeatedly, and it wants to make sure you survive. So instead of burning fat freely, it tightens its grip, and this is the hidden mechanism that traps so many dedicated runners in a cycle of effort without results. Here's where things get even more frustrating. You might think that as long as you're eating in a calorie deficit, fat loss is inevitable. And technically, that should be true. But a calorie deficit only works when your body feels safe enough to actually burn its stored energy. When stress hormones like cortisol are chronically elevated, your body can override that entire plan. Instead of tapping into fat stores for fuel, your metabolism slows down to conserve energy, and your hunger signals ramp up to encourage you to eat more. This means that even if you're tracking your food intake and believe you're in a deficit, your physiology might not be cooperating at all. The stress from excessive running creates an internal environment where your body would rather slow everything down and increase cravings than let go of precious fat reserves. And the tricky part is that this sabotage happens silently, beneath your conscious awareness. You might find yourself eating just a little more at meals without really noticing. You might feel hungrier throughout the day and think it's normal because you've been active. You might rest a little less because you feel like you need to keep pushing. Over time, these small, seemingly insignificant changes add up and quietly pull you out of the deficit you thought you were maintaining, and none of it feels like a deliberate choice. Now let's address something that might sound completely counterintuitive. How can your body preserve fat when you're clearly burning a ton of energy? It seems to defy logic, but remember, the human body is designed to prioritize survival above everything else. When your brain detects repeated physical strain without enough recovery, it doesn't see progress or fitness improvement. It sees a threat. Holding on to fat becomes a biochemical shield, a form of protection. And this is absolutely not a reflection of personal failure or lack of effort. In fact, it's a sign that your body is doing exactly what it was designed to do. When you run every single day without varying the intensity or allowing proper rest, another problem emerges. Your muscles begin to break down. Muscle tissue is metabolically expensive, meaning it requires energy just to exist. When you're constantly doing long-duration cardio without incorporating strength training, your body may decide that maintaining all that muscle isn't worth the cost. So it begins breaking down muscle tissue to meet the demands you're placing on it. And here's the kicker. Less muscle means a slower metabolism, fewer calories burned at rest, a harder time losing fat. You end up in a vicious loop where the more you run, the less effective your body becomes at burning fat, even though your effort keeps increasing. There's also the issue of where your body decides to store fat when cortisol is elevated. Research shows that high cortisol levels shift fat storage toward the abdominal region, specifically visceral fat, which is the metabolically active fat that surrounds your organs. This type of fat is particularly influenced by stress hormones, and it's also the fat that most people are desperately trying to reduce. So picture this. You're out there running, burning calories during the workout, but your internal hormonal environment is quietly encouraging fat to accumulate right in the area you're working so hard to slim down. It's not that running is inherently bad or harmful. Running is an incredible form of exercise with countless benefits. The problem arises when running lacks strategic structure, when it's done excessively without balance, and when the body starts receiving mixed signals that ultimately slow down fat loss instead of accelerating it. Let's dive deeper into what's happening inside your body during and after those long runs. Fatigue is often thought of as just feeling tired, maybe a little sore, nothing serious. But physiologically, fatigue is a cascade of events. Your glycogen stores, which are your body's preferred source of quick energy, get depleted. Inflammation levels rise as your muscles sustain microdamage from the repetitive impact. Cortisol continues circulating through your bloodstream long after you've finished your run. Each of these factors individually can impact fat-burning efficiency, but together, they create a significant drag on your metabolic system. Research has shown that prolonged endurance exercise can temporarily suppress thyroid function. Your thyroid produces hormones that directly regulate your metabolic rate, so even a mild suppression can lead to fewer calories burned throughout the entire day, not just during exercise. You might burn 500 calories on your run, but if your metabolism slows down by even a small percentage for the rest of the day, you're losing ground without realizing it. There's also something called neuromuscular fatigue that comes into play. As your body gets more and more tired from repeated running sessions, your form starts to deteriorate. Your stride becomes less efficient. Your muscles can't contract as forcefully. Your body's ability to use oxygen efficiently decreases. All of this means you're expending more effort to achieve the same output. You're working harder, but getting less benefit, and this imbalance just reinforces the cortisol loop we talked about earlier. Your body perceives even more stress, releases even more cortisol, and the cycle continues. Understanding fatigue from this scientific perspective is empowering because it shifts your focus from just grinding harder to actually training smarter. And that distinction is everything when it comes to getting the results you're after. Here's a question I want you to think about. Have you ever finished a run and felt absolutely ravenous, like you could eat everything in sight? That's not a coincidence, and it's not a sign of weak willpower. After a long or intense running session, your body shifts into recovery mode, and during this phase, hunger and cravings naturally spike. This is a completely normal biological response, but it often leads to what scientists call compensatory eating behaviors. Essentially, you end up consuming more calories than you realize, sometimes even more than you burned during the run itself. And this quietly cancels out the calorie deficit you worked so hard to create. This compensation isn't about poor discipline. It's about survival. When your glycogen levels drop and cortisol remains elevated, your brain interprets this as an urgent signal that energy reserves need to be replenished immediately. Your appetite intensifies, particularly for foods that are calorie-dense and provide quick energy, like carbohydrates and fats. And here's what makes this cycle so insidious. It feels completely logical. You tell yourself you've earned a bigger meal, or that you need to refuel properly after training. And while refueling is absolutely important, the hunger signals your body sends after stress-driven exercise are often exaggerated beyond your actual needs. Studies involving endurance athletes have consistently shown that many consume more calories after training than they expended during the workout. Over time, this creates an energy balance that feels like a deficit in your mind, but functions like maintenance or even a surplus in reality. And unless you're meticulously tracking every single bite, this compensation cycle stays completely invisible. When physical stress becomes chronic and unrelenting, your body makes strategic adaptations to conserve energy, and one of the first systems it adjusts is your metabolism. Excessive running, particularly when it's not balanced with resistance training, can trigger metabolic adaptations that reduce the number of calories you burn at rest. This isn't metabolic damage in the clinical sense, but rather metabolic efficiency, and ironically, this efficiency works directly against your fat loss goals. A major factor here is lean muscle mass. Muscle tissue is metabolically active, meaning it requires energy to maintain even when you're sitting on the couch, doing nothing. When you prioritize long-duration cardio over strength training, muscle breakdown can gradually outpace muscle synthesis. You lose muscle bit by bit, and with less muscle comes a slower metabolic rate. Fat loss becomes more difficult even though your training volume might be higher than ever. Another critical factor is hormonal adaptation, specifically involving your thyroid. Research indicates that excessive endurance training can decrease levels of active thyroid hormones like triiodothyronine, which plays a direct role in regulating how fast your metabolism runs. When thyroid function is suppressed, your body naturally shifts toward conserving energy rather than expending it freely. The good news is that these adaptations are reversible, but only when you change your training structure to include strength work, prioritize recovery, and ensure adequate nutrition. Most people don't realize their metabolism has quietly adjusted downward until their results completely stall. And by that point, frustration has already set in. But recognizing this pattern is the first step toward reversing it and getting your body back into a state where fat loss can actually happen. When cortisol rises repeatedly over time, it doesn't just affect your stress levels. It directly messes with your hunger hormones, specifically ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is the hormone that increases appetite and makes you feel hungry. Leptin is the hormone that signals fullness and tells you to stop eating. High cortisol disrupts the delicate balance between these two, making ghrelin louder and leptin quieter. The result is an overwhelming sensation of hunger that doesn't necessarily reflect your body's true energy needs. This hormonal imbalance explains why you might feel disproportionately hungry compared to the actual effort you put in during your run. Your body isn't sabotaging you out of spite, it's protecting you based on its interpretation of the stress signals it's receiving. To your physiology, repeated endurance exercise without adequate recovery feels like a genuine threat, and increased appetite is the survival tactic it deploys in response. What makes this even more challenging is that elevated cortisol also enhances your brain's reward response to highly palatable foods, especially those rich in sugar and fat. This means your cravings aren't just physical, they become emotionally charged. You find yourself reaching for snacks not only because your body wants fuel, but because your brain is seeking comfort and relief from the stress it's experiencing. When this biological drive persists day after day, maintaining a structured calorie deficit becomes incredibly difficult, no matter how strong your willpower might be. And here's the important part. Recognizing that hormones can overpower your intentions doesn't make you weak. It makes you informed. It gives you the knowledge to adjust your approach so that you're working with your biology instead of constantly fighting against it. Now let's talk about the solution, because this isn't just about understanding the problem. It's about knowing how to fix it. Cardio, including running, is an excellent tool for improving cardiovascular health, building endurance, and burning calories. But it doesn't create the same hormonal environment that strength training does. When you lift weights or perform resistance exercises, you're sending a completely different signal to your body. You're telling it to build and preserve muscle tissue, and this process increases your metabolic rate and enhances long-term fat loss in ways that cardio alone simply cannot. Muscle acts like a metabolic engine. The more muscle you have, the more calories you burn even when you're completely at rest. Meanwhile, excessive cardio without any resistance training can leave your body in a catabolic state, meaning instead of building tissue, it's breaking it down to keep up with the demands you're placing on it. While this might improve your endurance, it doesn't support the metabolic environment you need for sustained fat reduction. One of the most powerful aspects of strength training is something called excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, often referred to as the afterburn effect. After you finish a weightlifting session, your body continues burning calories at an elevated rate as it works to repair muscle fibers, restore energy balance, and return to its normal state. This effect lasts much longer than the calorie burn you get from steady-state cardio. When you combine strength training with moderate amounts of cardio, you create a metabolic environment that actively favors fat loss instead of just fatigue and stress. Understanding this balance is often the turning point for people who have been stuck in the cardio-only trap for months or even years. Muscle is often viewed as something purely aesthetic, something you build if you want to look a certain way. But metabolically, muscle holds extraordinary power. Every single pound of muscle on your body increases your daily caloric expenditure, meaning your metabolism becomes more efficient at using energy even when you're not moving. This alone makes muscle one of the strongest predictors of long-term fat loss success. More muscle also improves insulin sensitivity, which means your cells respond better to insulin and your body stores less fat while utilizing more energy from the carbohydrates you eat. This creates a stable and supportive hormonal environment for fat loss rather than one that constantly works against you. The protective benefits of muscle extend far beyond metabolism. Muscle reduces systemic inflammation, supports joint stability, improves bone density, and plays a crucial role in healthy aging. When you combine strength training with balanced cardio, your body can perform endurance activities without slipping into a stress-dominant state. This means better workouts, faster recovery, and most importantly, better results. If running is the engine that propels you forward, then muscle is the foundation that keeps your entire metabolic system resilient and responsive. Training smarter is less about doing more and more about doing what your body can actually benefit from. When you alternate between intense training sessions and lighter recovery days or complete rest, you give your body the space it needs to lower cortisol accumulation and restore balance. This simple adjustment can have a dramatic impact on fat loss because your physiology finally feels safe enough to mobilize stored energy instead of clinging to it for dear life. A well-balanced training structure might include 2 or 3 strength training sessions per week, 1 or 2 moderate-paced runs, and 1 higher-intensity interval session, all supported by designated rest days. Each of these components plays a different role. Interval training enhances cardiovascular efficiency without the prolonged cortisol spike of long, steady runs. Strength training builds metabolic capacity and preserves muscle. Rest allows your hormones to regulate and your tissues to repair. When these elements work together, the overall stress load becomes manageable instead of overwhelming, and your body starts adapting in positive, productive ways. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is learning to listen to the signals your body sends you. Poor sleep quality, persistent muscle soreness, irritability, mood swings, and increased appetite aren't signs of weakness or laziness. They're biological messages telling you that your training has become unbalanced and that your system is under too much stress. When you adjust your training intensity and volume based on these cues, you're training in alignment with your hormonal environment instead of against it. And when that alignment happens, your results don't just improve, they accelerate. You stop fighting your own biology and start working in harmony with it. The most effective fat loss strategy doesn't involve eliminating running altogether. It involves harmonizing running with strength work and giving equal importance to recovery. When you combine all three of these elements, you create a complete training ecosystem that supports your metabolism, regulates cortisol, and enhances overall performance. The goal isn't to run less. It's to run with purpose, supported by a body that's stronger, healthier, and more metabolically equipped to handle the demands you place on it. A practical weekly structure might look something like this: 2 to 3 days of strength training focused on compound movements that challenge multiple muscle groups. 1 or 2 moderate paced runs that keep your cardiovascular system engaged without pushing into chronic stress territory. 1 interval-based session that delivers a powerful stimulus in a shorter time frame. And then, critically, adequate rest woven throughout the week to allow your body to recover, adapt, and grow stronger. This variety prevents hormonal overload and keeps your body in a state of positive adaptation rather than constant breakdown. Over time, you become more efficient, stronger, and far more capable of burning fat because your body isn't stuck in survival mode anymore. Recovery plays a much deeper role than most people realize. Sleep quality, mobility work, proper hydration, and stress management all influence your cortisol levels and metabolic function. When you consistently address these elements, running transforms from a stress trigger into a genuine tool for improvement. Each workout becomes part of a larger, coherent plan rather than an isolated act of grinding. This balanced approach is not only sustainable, but it's also scientifically aligned with how human physiology actually thrives. Fat loss is not determined by effort alone. It's shaped by the signals your body receives every single day through your training, your nutrition, your sleep, and your stress levels. Hormones, particularly cortisol, play a massive role in whether your body chooses to store fat or release it. When running becomes excessive or unbalanced, those hormonal signals shift toward preservation instead of utilization, and no amount of willpower can override that biological response. But understanding these mechanisms gives you real power. Instead of relying on guesswork or outdated advice, you can shape your training around solid physiological principles. When cortisol is controlled, muscle is preserved, and recovery is respected, fat loss becomes a reliable outcome rather than a frustrating mystery. Your body stops resisting change and starts responding to it in the way you've always hoped it would. Science makes one thing incredibly clear: a healthy metabolism thrives under balance, not constant strain. When your training reflects this truth, your progress accelerates naturally. You feel stronger, you recover faster, and you experience fat loss not as an exhausting battle, but as a natural byproduct of smart, informed decisions. If this breakdown has helped you understand why running alone may have been blocking your results, I encourage you to share this information, support the channel, and keep observing your own experience. Your body is always communicating with you. Now you finally know how to listen.